This happened about 2 years ago when I was 25. I just moved into my first solo apartment. Nothing fancy. It was a one-bedroom on the second floor of a small complex, maybe 12 units total. The kind of place where the walls are thin enough to hear your neighbor's TV, but thick enough that you can pretend you don't. I'd been living with roommates since college, so having my own space felt like a luxury I probably couldn't afford but refused to give up. The neighborhood was decent. Not great, not terrible. There was a laundromat on the corner, a gas station across the street, and a small grocery store about a 5-minute walk away. The kind of area where you don't necessarily lock your car, but you also don't leave anything visible on the seats. I felt safe there. That's the part that's important to understand. I genuinely felt safe. I settled into a routine pretty quickly. I worked as a dental office receptionist, which meant early mornings and consistent hours. I'd leave by 7:15, get home around 5:30, cook dinner, watch something, and go to bed. Weekends I'd usually see friends or run errands. It was simple and predictable, and honestly, I liked it that way. After years of chaotic roommate schedules and shared spaces, predictability felt like a gift. The apartment itself was laid out simply. Front door opened into a small living room. Kitchen to the right. A short hallway led to the bathroom on the left and the bedroom at the end. One window in the living room that faced the parking lot and one in the bedroom that faced the back of the building. The backside was just a fence line and a strip of trees separating the complex from the next property over. I had curtains on both windows, but I'll admit I wasn't always great about closing them. I lived on the second floor. Who's gonna see in? About 3 months after I moved in, I came home from work on a Wednesday and something felt off. I couldn't place it at first. I stood in my doorway for a second and just looked around. Everything seemed normal. My shoes were by the door. The couch pillows were where I'd left them. The TV remote was on the arm of the couch. But something in my gut was pulling at me. You know that feeling when you walk into a room and the air feels slightly different? Like someone opened a window and closed it again, but the temperature hasn't quite settled back? That's the closest I can describe it. I set my bag down and walked through the apartment. Kitchen was fine, bathroom was fine, bedroom looked normal. I checked the windows, all locked. I checked the front door again. No scratches on the lock, no signs of forced entry. I told myself I was being paranoid, new apartment jitters. I made dinner and moved on with my night. 2 days later, on a Friday, I noticed something that actually made me stop. I have this small jewelry box on my dresser. It's wooden with a little brass latch, nothing expensive, just sentimental. My grandmother gave it to me before she passed. Inside, I keep a few necklaces, some earrings, a bracelet my mom gave me for my 21st birthday, and a ring that belonged to my grandmother. The ring was the most valuable thing in there, not in terms of money, but in terms of what it meant to me. I wore it sometimes, but mostly kept it in the box because I was terrified of losing it. That Friday, I opened the box to grab a pair of earrings, and I noticed the ring was on top. I always kept it tucked underneath everything else, nestled in the little velvet lining at the bottom. It was now sitting right on top of the other jewelry like someone had picked it up, looked at it, and set it back down. My stomach turned a little, but I convinced myself I must have moved it last time I was in there and just didn't remember. I put the earrings on, closed the box, and left for dinner with a friend. That weekend passed normally. Monday morning I left for work like usual. When I got home that evening, I kicked off my shoes and went to change. That's when I noticed my bedroom closet door was open. Not all the way, just about 6 inches. Enough to see darkness inside. I always keep that door closed. It's one of those sliding doors that doesn't stay on its track well, and if you leave it open, it bugs me. I know for a fact I closed it that morning because I remember sliding it shut after grabbing my jacket. I stood there staring at it for probably 10 seconds before I walked over and opened it all the way. Nothing, just my clothes, my hamper, a few boxes on the shelf above. Everything looked untouched. I slid it shut and checked the rest of the apartment. Front door was locked, windows locked. Nothing else out of place. That night I didn't sleep well. I kept waking up and listening. Every creak in the building made my eyes snap open. I told myself it was the closet door. Those sliding tracks are cheap. Maybe it just slid open on its own. Building things settle, floors shift, doors move. It made sense. I believed it because I needed to believe it. Wednesday of that same week is when things got harder to explain. I came home from work and went straight to the bathroom to wash my face. When I looked up at the mirror, I froze. My hairbrush was on the wrong side of the sink. I keep it on the left side next to my toothbrush holder. It was now on the right side, sitting on top of a folded hand towel. Not just moved, placed, deliberately, neatly placed, like someone had picked it up and set it down with intention. I stared at it for a long time. My mind was racing through explanations. Did maintenance come in? I hadn't submitted any requests. Did the landlord enter for an inspection? They're required to give 24-hour notice, and I hadn't received any. I checked my phone. No missed calls, no emails, no notes slipped under my door. I called my landlord. He answered on the third ring and sounded confused. When I asked if anyone had entered my unit, he said no maintenance, no inspections, no pest control. Nobody had any reason to be in my apartment. He asked if something was damaged, and I said no. I didn't tell him what was actually going on because honestly, what would I even say? My hairbrush moved? He'd think I was losing it. That night, I locked the front door, checked every window twice, and propped a chair under the door handle. I barely slept. Every sound in that building made my chest tighten. I lay in bed with my phone in my hand, ready to call 911 over what I kept telling myself was probably nothing. Thursday was quiet. So was Friday. Nothing moved. Nothing felt off. I started to relax a little. Maybe I had been overthinking it. Stress does weird things to memory and perception. I read somewhere that when you're anxious, your brain starts flagging things as threats that aren't actually threats. That's what I told myself. By Saturday, I was almost embarrassed for propping a chair against my door. Then came the following Tuesday. I should mention that I keep a small journal on my nightstand. Nothing fancy, just a little leather-bound notebook where I jot down things before bed. Grocery lists, reminders, sometimes just thoughts about my day. I'd been writing in it almost every night since I moved in. It was part of my wind-down routine. That Tuesday, I got home from work and walked in, set my bag down, took off my shoes. I walked to the bedroom to change and decided to flip through the journal for a second because I remembered writing down something I needed to pick up from the store. I was thumbing through the pages when I landed on an entry I didn't recognize. It was dated from the previous Thursday, one of the quiet nights, one of the nights I told myself nothing was wrong. The handwriting looked like mine. Not exactly mine, but close enough to make my hands start trembling. Someone had studied the way I write, the slant, the way I loop my G's, the way I cross my T's a little too far to the right. They had practiced it, and they had used it to write a full entry about my evening. It described what I had for dinner that night, pasta with red sauce and a glass of white wine. It described what I watched on TV, an episode of a cooking competition show. It noted what time I turned off the light, 10:47, and then at the bottom, in that same careful imitation of my handwriting, was one sentence that didn't describe anything I did. It said, "She leaves the bedroom window cracked when she cooks because of the steam." And I do. I always crack it when I'm boiling water because the kitchen vent doesn't work well and the steam fogs up the bathroom mirror. I never even thought about it as a habit. But someone had been watching me closely enough to notice. I can't describe what that moment feels like. Your body goes cold and hot at the same time. Your legs feel like they might give out. Your brain tries to reject what your eyes are showing you because the implication is so much worse than a break-in. Someone had been watching my evening through the window, close enough to see what I was eating and what was on my TV screen, and then after I fell asleep, they let themselves inside, sat down at my nightstand and wrote about it in my own journal as if they had lived it with me, not as a voyeur, as a participant, like they were inserting themselves into my life from the inside. I dropped the journal and backed out of the room. I grabbed my keys and left the apartment. I sat in my car in the parking lot and called the police. My voice was shaking so badly the dispatcher asked me twice if I was injured. I told her someone had been inside my apartment. She asked if they were still there. I said I didn't know. I said I didn't think so, but I also said I didn't know how many times they'd been there before. 2 officers came. They searched the apartment and found no one inside. They checked the windows, the locks, the door frame. No signs of forced entry. One of them asked if I had given anyone a spare key. I hadn't. He asked if there was an ex-boyfriend or anyone who might have access. There wasn't. The other officer bagged the journal as evidence. He told me they'd file a report and that I should consider changing my locks and maybe staying somewhere else for a few nights. I went to my friend Sarah's apartment that night. I told her everything. She believed me without hesitation, which I was grateful for because I was starting to doubt myself. We talked it through, and she helped me make a list of everything that had happened, the air feeling different. The ring moved in the jewelry box, the closet door, the hairbrush, and now a journal entry written in my handwriting by someone who wasn't me. When I saw it all written out, a pattern became obvious. Whoever was doing this wasn't stealing from me. They were leaving proof that they'd been there. Each time the sign was a little more personal, a little closer to me. The ring I inherited, the brush I use on my hair every morning, and then a handwritten record of my most private routines, penned by a stranger sitting in my bedroom while I slept. They were escalating, not in violence but in intimacy, and that was somehow worse. I had my locks changed the next day, deadbolt and knob. I also bought a cheap security camera off Amazon and set it up on my bookshelf facing the front door. For about a week and a half, nothing happened. The camera recorded nothing but me coming and going. I started to feel a little safer. I stopped staying at Sarah's. I figured the lock change had solved it. Then I checked my jewelry box. The ring was gone. Not moved, not rearranged, gone. I tore the box apart. I searched every drawer, every pocket, every surface in the bedroom. It wasn't anywhere. I checked the camera footage. Nothing. The front door hadn't been opened by anyone but me. I went through every second of footage from the past 10 days, and there was nothing. Whoever took it hadn't come through the front door. I called the police again. A different officer came this time. He was more thorough. He checked the bedroom window from outside, climbing up to the 2nd floor on a maintenance ladder. That's when he found it. The window lock had been tampered with. From the outside, someone had used something thin, like a flathead screwdriver or a butter knife, to push the latch sideways. It left a small scratch on the frame that you'd never notice unless you were looking for it. The window could be opened from the outside without breaking anything. He told me the lock needed to be reinforced or replaced, and that I should put a wooden dowel in the track as a secondary block. He also told me, and I remember his exact words, that whoever was doing this was not behaving like a typical burglar. He said burglars take electronics, cash, things they can sell. This person took one item of sentimental value and left everything else untouched. He said the word fixation, and it made my skin crawl. I moved out 2 weeks later. I didn't wait for the lease to end. I told my landlord what had happened, and he let me break it without penalty, probably because he didn't want the liability. I moved in with Sarah temporarily and then found a new place across town. New locks, new windows, security system, cameras on every entry point. The police never caught anyone. There were no fingerprints on the journal that didn't belong to me. No useful footage from the complex's exterior cameras, which only covered the front entrance and the parking lot. The window approach was from the back of the building where there was nothing but a fence line and a strip of trees. No one saw anything. No one heard anything. The case went cold within a month. I still think about that ring, not just because it was my grandmother's, but because of what taking it meant. Whoever was in my apartment had been there multiple times. They touched my things. They sat in my room and wrote about my life like it was theirs. They had the opportunity to take anything or to do anything, but they chose to take the one object that meant the most to me, and that's what haunts me. I never talked about that ring inside the apartment. I never said its significance out loud in that space, which means they had been watching me hold it, turn it over in my fingers, tuck it beneath the velvet lining with the kind of care you only show something you love. They learned what it meant to me by studying me, and then they took it anyway. The new apartment has been fine, no signs of anything, but I check my windows every single night. I check my jewelry box every single morning, and I don't keep a journal anymore. I can't. The thought of opening a notebook and finding someone else's version of my life written in my own handwriting is something I will never risk experiencing again. Some nights, when the building settles and the floors creak, I lie there wide awake and listen, not for sounds that are there, but for the silence of someone who's already inside and trying not to make any.